people now. And it's on this LinkedIn group where we're posting content that we glean from all of the readings that we do about either on the media side, meaning magazines or multi-channel, on the events side, digital out of home, what's happening in that space. So we post links to lots of good self-help articles, as well as all of the video of our fireside chats that we've had dating back to early March when this all started. I guess it's probably something like 16 of them now that we've done, or we're coming up on 16th, I can't remember. But anyway, join that group. You'll have access to all that content. Regarding the topic of the day, I'm just going to try and move get myself out of the way. The why revisions to the standards. So we've been working with a group of our audience development stakeholders and asked them the question, have the BPA standards evolved into something too gargantuan for the current media economy? And are those standards over-engineered, given a marketplace that's sustained by about 50% of the print ad dollars that it used to be? And now that we have hopefully some simpler times, does that mean a simpler model? And so we asked that question of our stakeholders: Julie Ball from Gardner Business Media, Christina Bildu from MJH Life Sciences, Jim Browning at Hard Energy, John Crew, who has been a board member. He just retired on Friday, having done 6 years, which is our statutory term limit. But John from Haymarket, Richard Jarrett from Gateway Circulation Services, and then Amanda Landsaw, excuse me, started out with us, had a maternity leave. Congratulations again, Amanda. We were joined by Emily Martin in the meanwhile, and now Amanda is back with us from Endeavor. Catherine Ronan from BNP, Christina Warner from GIE Media, Jerry Wilson at Crane, and Sue Stearns from Meister. Those folks have been meeting with us every Friday since November 22nd for about an hour and a half to go through all of the BPA standards and to do a refresh. So this is the fruit of their labor. And as they were going through, they felt that, yes, revising what needs to change due to data protection and consumer privacy. So GDPR does touch a few of the rules, particularly when we get into requests from company and the number of people that you might gather that way. So we had to address that. And then we have the California Act. That did not have as much impact as we all originally thought. But once we gave it a thorough reading, it didn't really touch too many BPA standards, but nonetheless, we did look at that. And then ideating a more efficient methodology for consent management and qualifying an audience, that's still on the front burner, if you will. Eliminating that which is out of date. Surprisingly, there was a decent amount of that. And then responding to a lack of demand for independent third-party assurance. So how are the media buyers using the report, and how can we encourage them to do more? So very quickly, the ones that were passed in March, and I'm just giving you now the executive summary level. All of the amendments you can find on our website, as well as the press release that would explain in an executive summary format the significance of the changes. But I'm just going to give you the high level ones. The first was delivery alert bounces. This is for digital magazines. And we were telling people they had to take all of the alerts basically out of the system before sending the next issue. And we took a step back. Our working group had said, hey, that's a little too arduous for soft bounces. And now this was pre-pandemic too. But the point was it was too arduous for soft bounces. And we ought to be able to be more flexible and allow the publishers opportunity to continue to send digital issues of the magazines to those who were soft bounces. Meanwhile, inactivate the hard bounces right away. So the decision was taken, yep, we agree, period of 90 days before a soft bounce needs to be suppressed or inactivated. But hard bounces, they've got to come out before the next issue, digital email alert would go out. Next, recency of engagement. We have 2 publications in the dental field, Dental Products Shopper and Dental Products Report. And they were reporting, or are reporting, recency of engagement. And we've taken a step forward now and formalized that in the standards. So we're adding an optional, keyword optional, a table breakdown of request and non-request for recency of engagement. And it's going to be done through a 24-month period, not the traditional 1-year, 2-year, 3-year breakout. So you'll have 12 months, 24 months, and then the third group would be for those that you don't have the data. The table would let the media buyer see how recent the engagement was, which is very likely to be equal to or more recent than the opt-in for the magazine. So the trick here was, or not the trick, but the point, I should say, was if I have opt-in consents, requests that are older than 2 years, media buyers would like to see that they're engaged somehow with the brand more recently than beyond 2 years. So the table looks a bit like this: request, all other sources. You have your 1 year, your 2 year field, data not available. And then we define what is an engagement. And it's very open-ended because we couldn't possibly today have defined everything. But if it's a website of a media brand that was visited, the media owner can trace a visit back to a permissioned user or a requester. That visit could be interpreted as a communication. So visited a website is a form of engagement, right? So we've added that. Engagement, again, is limited to that which occurred within 24 months. Now, effective August 2021, which it really impacts the December 2021 reports. If you don't report age of source, which we'll get to in a second, and there exists circulation greater than 24 months, that segment of the circulation has to be analyzed for recency of engagement, right? So at a minimum, come December 2021, if you do not report age, again, age by source, you would then show engagement for those that are over 24 months. So you'd have two tables, your source and age table without age, and then you'd have your recency of engagement table. Now, age of source, we had in the early days of the pandemic announced that we were granting an exception to reporting age during this pandemic. So for the June 2020 statements, you didn't have to report age. Well, because of the response that we got to that in the board agreement, we've moved on to breaking out age into giving you the option, right, forever. This is permanent. So you now have the option to report age in paragraph 3B, the source table. So you would show sources if you don't show age, but you wouldn't have to show the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. But again, I remind you, if you take that option and if you have circulation over 24 months and it's December 2021, then you should look to report recency of engagement for that group, which is over 24 years. But you're certainly welcome to do it for the 1, 2, and the 3 year. So media buyers who are more interested in granularity, they'll make their requests if they don't see it in the source and age table if age is now missing. But considering the precipitous drop in the ad revenue, less time seems to be devoted to analyzing that data such that the return on the investment was diminished. So we felt that it was a fair trade-off to allow publishers to opt out of reporting age. But again, if they have circulation over 2 years, that we would like to see recency of engagement come the end of 2021. So all circulation still has to be within the 36 months, but you now have the option to break out that year. And we've had some feedback from publishers who have said, I want to report age, but I only want to report within 24 months. Can I do that? Yeah, yes, the answer is absolutely yes, you could. And this 36-month requirement is in sync with the post office. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to cover off some of the exceptions we've made due to the pandemic, one of which is in sync with the post office on the 36-month requirement, where we've lifted that for the period on the June 2020 reports, where you can go out 48 months, but I'll come back to that. Okay, GDPR, the effects on the opt-outs, right? We allow 90 days for the opt-outs. GDPR requires 30. So we had to just write into our standards a cautionary remark to be aware of data protection regulations. So if you're not serving any European residents, you don't need to worry about it. But if you are, you just need to be cognizant that their opt-out requirement is 30 days. So we went on to say, and this is the bold italics section, be advised that the standard is not acceptable under GDPR and that recipients opting out have to be removed within 30 days. So this is the kind of statement that now appears in the new amendments. Clarification was needed because we had allowed telecommunication or the telemarketing firms to solicit requests from an individual plus one other. And we were not allowing that for written and for electronic, but we were for telecommunications. So we've now standardized it. It applies to all three: written, telecommunication, and the electronic. But we wanted to clarify so that if you call me, and let's say it's Folio Magazine, very apropos, and I am asked to request Folio for myself, that would be a personal request. I might request it for another BPA employee. That second person would count as a request. If I go to a third person now, no, that becomes written requests from the third person on, right? But the first two would count as personal requests. So what we had to clarify was, what if you call me and I'm not making a request for myself, but I make it for two other people? Well, we're saying those two other people count as personal requests. So the first two are personal. From 3 on, it's requests from recipients company. So we've made that standard now across written, telecom, and electronic. So when you look at the amendments, there's like 3 amendments, but the point is it's harmonized now. So I'm just going to say it once here and not take you through all 3. The other bit was we're going to change the source communication just to make it communication other than request, striking the from recipient or recipient's company. Not a big deal. It's just wordings that we've changed there. But we did make the change that multi-copy requests could be done now across all 3. Again, make it harmonized: written, telephone, and electronic, so that the employer could make a bulk request, if you will, for employees. The brand report. Now we've changed the executive summary, which is on the first page of the report. And this, we moved. We used to break out the magazine would show print and then digital. And then the digital would show request and non-request. We're now moving that off the front page. The executive summary stays, but not the print, digital, request, non-request breakout. There, we put a direction to see paragraph 3B in the report, which will provide a more detailed breakdown, right? So we're trying to drive the buyer into the granularity of the report. But of course, we got a question right away. Hey, I'm a publisher. I want to break out my print and my digital. I want to show the difference. Can I still do that? Can I opt to do it? The answer is absolutely yes. So the executive summary, you can have it print and digital. If you do that, both print and digital have to further be broken out between request and non-request. So either we take it out, the executive summary is there with the direction to see 3B if you want to know the type of format or you want to know the source. But if you want to show it on the front page as the publisher, you certainly can. But again, you'd now show print, request, non-request, and then a second grouping, digital, a figure for request and a figure for non-request. That's optional. There it is, right? So here it is. You can see underneath the Criterion magazine. I can bring my own cursor here, right? So see paragraph 3B for format, type, and source. Section 205 has to deal with the qualification period. And this came out of our Fireside Chats. Can you change the qualification period to end 1 day outside the month of the issue analyzed? So what we're doing now is changing to permit the year brackets, the guardrails, if you will, on what defines each year to change from having to end a day during the month of the issues analyzed. So we're coming up on June 20. Most everyone is going to analyze May. So typically your qual period had to end 1 day in the month of May of 2020. So we're taking that and saying we're going to extend that to allow you to start that qualification period from the moment you create your label file, which was probably a date in April, right? So one way to do it would be to count from May of 19 through April of, actually effectively May 1st of 2020, and that would be your qualification period. But with this change, you could go back and say, okay, I ran my label file on April 15th of 19. So I would like to start April 15th of 19 and run through April 14th of 20. We will now allow that to happen, okay? Further, we agree that that date change can happen from year to year. It's not that you now have to pick and now rigidly stay with April 15th through April 14th. We're saying no. Last year you ran your label file on April 15th, you can use that. This year, let's say it becomes April 19th for whatever reason. You know, with the pandemic, printing plants have been delayed either because they were originally non-essential, then they became essential. Some had to shut because of the virus and they had to disinfect. So schedules got delayed. So maybe this year it's April 23rd. Yeah, we're saying year to year, you can pick your qualification period. It has to end either from the label file date all the way on through the end of the month of the issue analyzed. So some folks would run their label file on April 15th, but then continue to process renewals and new names through April, all the way through May, and use May 31st. So they would retroactively update the label file, so they got their year effectively from June 1st of 19 through May 31st of this year. You can still do that. But there are others who said, no, I want to do the label file, put it to bed, don't want to touch the file again, and let's move on. So that gives the publisher now flexibility to determine circulation production to their best efficiency. And in effect, yeah, there are some names that would be counted as 1 year, last year. And you may now find for a week or two, or up to maybe 6 weeks if you ran from mid-April through the end of May, that they're going to get claimed as 1 year again because you've decided to move the guardrails behind what's 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year. That was heresy at BPA. We've all been trained not to allow that. Well, we're now changing that. You can do that. We understand you need the extra flexibility. Here's a graphic of what it might look like trying to describe 1 year, 2 year, 3 year when you just change those guardrails by a week or two on either end of the system. But that's an important high-level change, I would say, important change that we've made. Next, we modified the requirement for other. A few years ago, we found that people were lumping other with other categories. Let's make this up. You have a demographic category for title that's the C-suite, CEO, CFO, CTO, what have you, and other. And you would say, let's say that was 50% of the circulation. Well, no one really knew how much was other versus how much was C-suite executives. So we had made a requirement that you have to always break out others separately. So there could be no way to obfuscate about what the real number of C-suite executives happens to be. Well, some folks didn't use a demographic table for the breakout. Rather, they had a paragraphical expression, just a run-on paragraph of the different types of either industries or occupations that were being served, including other. And we started to make people break out the other. That really probably wasn't too clever of us. So we're revisiting that and say, that if you say it in the parenthetical, in the paragraphical, you do not have to break out other. So here's a data table, line items. You'll notice the last one is other. That's what the requirement is. Here, however, is a paragraphical, and you can see we made someone break out others allied to the field, the 375 copies, and we're changing that rule now. The paragraphical can stay all in one, and the others allied to the field would be grouped in above with everything else. So that's the change there. The recency of engagement table I talked about earlier. We've added clarification by way of definition as to what is considered engagement. So here's the table, and we have the expression underneath that describes what the publisher is using as defining engagement. So if it's a purchase, what you need to document at the time of audit that the purchase has happened. Same with an email newsletter, same with the website, document downloads, event or webinar registration or attendance, other communications. So we've now put in the standards what you would need to have as a record to document that. In that conversation, something came up regarding the websites, and I use an example here of a website. I made it up called numbers.com, but it happens to be the website for Magazine 1, Magazine 2, and Magazine 3. So if I went to any one of those magazines, normally on every page, there's a page number and then there's a URL. That URL happened to be numbers.com. So if I'm a recipient of Magazine 1, I go to numbers.com. That's my website. That's an engagement. If I'm a recipient of Magazine 2, I go to numbers.com because that's my website. That counts as an engagement. Likewise with Magazine 3. And if I get Magazines 1 and 2, and I go to numbers.com, we're counting that as an engagement for Magazine 1 and an engagement for Magazine 2. So this standard has been revised to take the user through that. You have a better understanding of how website activity would be reported as an engagement for a particular brand. And then we would have a footnote, and in the footnote that I showed you earlier, I'll go back again, right here. So in that description below the line that says what the type of engagement was. We're saying that note would now be including here, we see, and you visited www.numbers.com. So we're putting the URL right in the note. So any user of the report can see, well, what website actually did you have to visit to trigger an engagement? Coming back to the bounces, we did not change the requirement for email newsletters, okay? So while we said for a digital magazine where you're pushing out an alert saying your copy is now available, you get a soft bounce, you can keep sending alerts for 90 days. If you were monthly, that means the next 2 issues beyond the one that you just sent. So you get 3 issues that could go out to that soft bounce before you have to take action. Whereas with email newsletters, bounce is a bounce. We're reporting on the actual gross attempts, right? So the number of emails that you sent out after you took the unsubscribes off. And we're also reporting the net deliverables. So that's the gross attempts less the unsubscribed and undelivered recipients. And the undelivered recipients are the bounces, right? So undelivered is an email to a qualified subscriber if it's undeliverable, and the information as such is sent back to the email service provider. It's defined as a bounce. And the bottom line there is all bounces are counted as undelivered. So if you're doing a digital magazine, you have 90 days with the soft bounces. If you're doing an email newsletter, a bounce is a bounce. We're reporting on the net. And then what's next? We're working literally today on revising the standards for digital only. So this would be something that never had print or doesn't currently have print. So it's not a replica or a replica plus. It's purely its own standalone digital publication. So we've had to go through the standards and look to see everywhere we refer to print, how do we take that out? What other things do we need to have in that reflect reporting of digital only circulation or distribution? So I expect, I don't know, certainly before the summer is out, that'll all be done, dusted, and published, but potentially even sooner. So again, I'd like to thank our working group, you know who they now are, the group of 10 who've worked with me since early November to get through all of these amendments. And I would say if you visit on our website, or if you do go through the Coping with Corona in Media, you'll find the link. But this is the FAQ that we have published regarding members' reporting options, right, since the Corona. I highlight the 2 big ones there, of course. Reporting age altogether is optional. And we're allowing through June 2020 that you can have circulation as old as 48 months, right? If you're a Canadian publication, you happen to be on the line today, you might be using the reporting period ending September 2020. Yes, you can go out through September 2020 with 48 months. But the plan is by the December 2020, we're back to 36 months. Following our announcement, just coincidental, the post office announced as well that they were now saying, due to the pandemic, we'll accept 48 months. Theirs lapses July 15th. So, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, Chuck Tricamo from the post office, from the classification and rates group, was part of our Fireside Chat, and he let us know that they're going to evaluate that 48-month period and make a determination, he said mid to late June. So we've been asked the same question, and I've been in touch with Chuck. We want to work together on that. So if the post office is going to extend the 48-month period further, we will. If we extend it further, I don't know yet if they will, but that's what we're trying to get some harmony there. So it could be that for the December 2020, we would allow, continue to allow 48 months. And the whole reason is everyone's just getting back. You know, we opened up yesterday here in Connecticut, phase 1. Other companies are going to open up, and audience development folk are going to be challenged trying to find out who was laid off, who's furloughed. In other words, who's not at work anymore that's receiving magazines, and how do those files get updated? And that might not all happen in time for a November analyzed issue. So that's one of the changes. And then the third highlight I would say would be we will allow you to choose any issue as your analyzed issue. That's been the case for a while, but the stipulation was you had to stick with it for 3 years, and we're taking that stipulation out. You can change the analyzed issue every 6 months if you want. Eventually, and you know, I think we took it out through June of 2021. So the next 3, June 20, December 20, June 2021. After that, we'll probably look at that standard again and maybe bring it back to, once you pick, you should stick with it for a period of time. The standard was 36 months, but we'll see. So I'm not going to commit either way, but that's the timetable for a decision on that. So this FAQ is, gosh, it must be, well, it's more than a dozen pages. It's probably close to 20 pages. I would encourage you, if you've not looked at that, to come onto the website, download that FAQ, because that will give you all of the stipulations. And it came about through stakeholder response by our fireside chats. The first FAQ was probably just a couple of pages, but at each fireside chat, which we have twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays at 11, we've gotten a lot of feedback from our stakeholders. We take their questions and we put it into the FAQ in the form of, obviously, Q&A, so that everyone's interests are addressed. What is our next virtual town hall? A little bit of a commercial message here. Our next one is next Wednesday, the 27th. Folio on April 28th reported that BNP would take most of its magazines to digital only by August. Initially planned for the end of 2022, but the company is accelerating its print to digital shift. So next Wednesday, Taggart Henderson, who's the co-president of BNP Media, will be my guest, and we'll have a fireside chat with Tag about this change that BNP is going to make. So I invite you all to participate, to hear one of the pioneers in this space in terms of moving from a print business into a totally digital. So that's Wednesday the 27th. It's 11 o'clock Eastern. Again, the invite will be in our Coping with Corona in Media, also on the website. And if you're a member, you're probably getting an email blast from us on that anyway. But there again, that's the LinkedIn group. If you'd like to go there, request to join, we'll let you in and you'll have access to all of that information. So Todd, that's where we are. And I don't know if you've gotten any questions there, or if I spoke too quick that nobody has questions, but
No, we actually have. But the thing I wanted to ask you first was, as I'm thinking about it, and I've known about your fireside chats and the fact that I hear many times you actually sit right in front of the fireplace when you're at home. Curious what stood out to you as you've interacted with folks. Is there things that are giving you smile? If there's things that are giving you pause as our industry works through COVID-19 and finds a new normal? Where are you drawing your inspiration from as you talk to colleagues and everyone in the industry?
Well, certainly there's a lot of content about how a brand should handle itself in the time of a crisis like this pandemic. Most of the content is written about, if you're an advertiser, why you should continue to advertise. But more or less, it also takes a view that, let's say you're a publisher. How do you help your community cope in this pandemic? So I took a lot of inspiration from just reading general industry observations about how brands should act in a crisis. And very quickly came to the conclusion that fear is our worst enemy. Sure. And what people wanted to have was someone to listen to them, to take their questions, give them some guidance. Where you can't help, you tell them you can't help, but where you can, you do. Sure. And you be true to your brand. So that's where it came from.
I think that piece there about authentic and just being real is so important. I saw some report or study that said, the more slick, the more gloss over, people just want relationships right now. They just want to be true and working back and forth with people. So that resonates. I do have a question here. One person asked if it's okay to move a digital edition on deliverables back to print.
Yes, it would depend on the undeliverable. I mean, if you're getting, meaning you had an email alert that went out saying, here's your digital copy, and it comes back and technically it's a hard bounce. Either it says John Doe is no longer employed here, or John Doe is deceased, or as compared to mailboxes full or out of office or something like that. If you got a hard bounce, I would say, no, you should not now transition that back to print, because John Doe is no longer there. So you should be taking John Doe off the file and looking to replace John Doe. But if it's a soft bounce, no, certainly you could switch back to print. And by the way, we were also, one of the changes we made in that FAQ, we were allowing people to move from print to digital without getting the opt-in request during the pandemic. But yeah, you could go back the other way also.
Thanks. Had one other question, and I think you may have hit into some of it as you were talking about some of the different timings and allowing for some flexibility, but just to make sure we get it, we asked the question point on. A person was asking about whether you anticipated reporting flexibility into 21.
Well, I would have to ask the follow-up of the person specifically what, because like I said,
Sure.
we're allowing, you can pick any analyzed issue that goes into 2021. We're not at the moment allowing an extension on the 36 months. That stops June 2020. We are allowing permanently now, you cannot report age. So there's different aspects that have different expiration dates, if I may.
Sure. And certainly anybody who has a specific question, the FAQ gives you a pathway back in, or I'm guessing
Yeah.
folks listening know how to get to you all and ask their specific questions beyond that. Glenn, we're grateful. Thank you to folks listening and whatnot. We will have a copy of this video on our website in the next day. Hopefully before the long weekend, we'll get it out in our newsletter, and it will be part of a resource bank that you can continue to go back to. And hopefully, Glenn, as things change and we get a bit further down the road and it's smart for another update, maybe you'd come back and join us.
Will do.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Glenn.
Have a good day.
All right, take care.
Bye.